Bad Boys Ride or Die may be the best in the franchise, and at the end of this video, I will tell you where I think this movie ranks up against the others. But for now, let's talk about this thing. Now, this will be a spoiler-free movie review, but if you want to see what I gave this movie out of 10, head over to my shorts, TikTok, or Instagram and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. But without further ado, let's talk about Bad Boys Ride or Die. So this movie is directed by Adil Arbi and Billal Fallah, who are the same directors who directed Bad Boys for Life. And in this movie, we follow both Mike and Marcus. After their old police captain gets framed for working with the cartel, they now must go on a dangerous mission to clear their captain's name and prove his innocence. Starting things off with the good, I of course have Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. These guys were just awesome as always. They did not miss a beat throughout this entire movie, and their chemistry is truly unmatched. And the more I think about it, there are not many other duos out there that have better chemistry than they do. These two are the reason that you go see these movies, and their banter back and forth was just so entertaining to watch throughout this entire thing. And on top of that, it just seemed like they were just having genuine fun working with each other again. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if some of their banter back and forth was improvised, just because their chemistry is just that good. And given that this is the fourth movie in this franchise, they very easily could have just phoned it in for this movie and collected a paycheck, but no, that's not what they did. They were completely invested in their characters, as they always are, and you could really tell that they just love playing these characters. And this is one of those franchises that if they want to make 10 more movies, I'm gonna go see them as long as Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are a part of them. Next up for the good, I have the humor, and I'm gonna be honest, I thought this movie was just downright hilarious. I mean, there were so many laugh out loud moments in this thing. But man, the funniest thing about this movie was easily Martin Lawrence. If I had to describe his character with one word in this movie, it would just be straight up goofy. So his character went through a health scare in the beginning of this film, and that led him to have this crazy belief that he just couldn't die no matter what happened, and that obviously led to a lot of comedy that I thought was hilarious. Yes, he was a little over the top, but I laughed in just about every scene that he was in, and then you add that on to the banter that he had with Will Smith, with all the other humor that happened in this movie, and yeah, it makes for a pretty entertaining time. Next up for the good, I have the action, and for me, this is some of the best action I think we've gotten in this franchise. Now, it's super tough to top the Michael Bay action that we got in those first two films, but this movie does a good job at not only paying homage to that, but also being its own thing as well. This action and the way it was shot was just super creative. I mean, they had FPV drones flying through all the action scenes, getting one shots, which I thought was super cool. And they also had some first person shots in there like you were playing Call of Duty, and they even released some behind the scenes on how they got those shots. And being a kind of film nerd that I consider myself to be, and wanting to hopefully shoot action scenes like that one day, I just thought that was super cool. Not only how they pulled that shot off, but then also how it looked in the movie. Adil Arbi and Billal Fallah added their own flair and style to the action in this, and that made it feel unique. And if this is the action that we got from them in a Bad Boys movie, then that makes me even more mad that Warner Brothers shelved their Batgirl movie, because I can't even imagine the action that we would have gotten in that thing. And finally, for the good, I have the story. Now, for me, I thought this is one of the stronger stories that we have gotten from this franchise. It was not perfect by any means, but this story was a bit more personal for Mike and Marcus, and that made it easy for me to get invested into it. I also think they did a pretty good job at continuing the previous movie's story with Mike's son. This is something they very easily could have just forgotten about and abandoned in this movie, but I do appreciate that they kept that storyline going and kept building that relationship between Mike and his son. Now, the side characters also made this story that much better, because they each got their own little moment to shine throughout this movie, more specifically Reggie. And I'm gonna try not to spoil it, but there is a scene in this movie involving Reggie that is not only the best part in this film, but it may be the best part in this entire Bad Boys franchise, and I guarantee you will be clapping and screaming and laughing and cheering when you see it, because it is just that awesome. And if you've seen the movie, then you know exactly what scene I am talking about. Moving on to the so-so, and the only thing I have here is that even though I thought the story was good and I enjoyed it, it was still a bit predictable. I mean, as this movie got going, it was pretty easy to tell who the actual villain would come out to be in this movie, and that kind of took some of the suspense out of it. So when we got to that big reveal of who the snake / real villain was in this thing, it really wasn't all that much of a surprise because you kind of figured it out pretty easily earlier in the movie, and it was one of those things where you're like, hey, that person right there looks suspicious, and they're probably the person that's doing all the bad things, and they're probably the person that you are looking for. And even though this movie is wildly entertaining, it is also one of those movies that you may feel like you've seen this plot before. And finally, getting into the bad, and the first thing I have here is that there were some aspects of Will Smith's character that they introduced, but never really explored all that much. Now, this isn't really a spoiler, but he does have panic attacks in this movie because now he has something to lose in this film, like his son and his new wife. And I thought this was a cool aspect to introduce for his character because it showed that the great Mike Lowrey, the all-powerful Mike Lowrey that we know, is vulnerable in this film. But then they kind of wrap that aspect up really quickly at the end of this film so we can get back to that old Mike Lowrey that we know for the grand finale. For me personally, I just thought that was really weird to have that as a big part of his character in this movie and then wrap it up in like 10 seconds at the end of this movie. I just feel like there was more to explore there. And finally, for the bad, I have the villain. Now, this villain wasn't all that good at all. I mean, he kind of just popped in and out of this movie just to remind us that he was still there hunting Marcus and Mike. They tried to give him a little backstory, but he just turned out to be another generic cliche villain that you don't really care about. Now, I know the Bad Boys movies aren't known to have the greatest villains of all time, so it's not that big of a deal at the end of the day. I just wish this villain had a little bit more screen time and a little bit more of a presence in this movie. But anyways, my final thoughts on this movie are that this is a hilarious, action-packed film that is a blast to watch. Martin Lawrence and Will Smith are just as good as they always are, and I think this is a must-see movie this summer. And with that said, if I had to rank this movie against all the other films in this franchise, you can call it recency bias, but I would put it at number 2 right now. And if you want to see my ranking of all 4 movies in this franchise, then go ahead and subscribe and stay tuned for that video, which will be coming out in the next couple of days. Those are my thoughts on Bad Boys Ride or Die. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments. And as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.